All right, thank you for joining us today. I am here with Sean Denherter of Denherter Homes, and Sean and I go back a few years over some other business dealings. So, Sean, thank you for the show and welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Sean, you have a very unique story, and kind of our off-camera conversations over the past week or so have gone in probably 50 different directions. And so that's kind of what I want this to be as well. Let's just see where it goes.
Hmm.
But part of your backstory is, and this is what you've told me, is that you're just a kid who graduated high school, never went to college, but you have built a successful custom home building business. And I am very interested and curious into just the mindset that goes into something like that as, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid who comes out of high school, and then you start a business pretty much right away and have grown it into something great for you and your family. So if you could kind of give us a little bit of
Yeah.
backstory about where that started in high school and kind of how you've progressed.
Yeah. In high school, I don't think I ever had the thought that, hey, I'm going to be a custom home builder for myself and work for myself. You know, I remember taking kind of a mechanical drawing class in um, high school that maybe was a drafting class or something like that. And I drew up a house plan. And I remember I loved the plan. It was a ranch style house and it had a little bit of an angle to it where the garage sat at a little angle to the house. And I was a 15 or 16-year-old kid. And something about it was interesting to me. I liked the way that it felt when I drew that house up. I liked my thought process, I guess, of what would it be like if I could figure out how to build a house like this.
Hmm.
And maybe that was my first introduction to maybe I'm interested in real estate or housing or building or something like
Hmm.
that. But even after I graduated high school, there was nothing that said to me, Sean, you're going to be a custom home builder or you're going to do remodels for people or put additions on people's houses. Nothing of that was on my radar at all. In fact, um, I didn't really know how to swing a hammer if I'm being honest with you.
That was my next question was, did you grow up around the trades or were there people in your
No.
family who were in the trades, anything like that? So this was completely out of left field then.
Yeah. You could say that it's genetics for whatever that means. My grandfather, as I'm getting older now, I hear some more stories, but my dad's dad was a custom home builder in New Jersey. And he
Okay.
had a successful building business for many, many years, and some of his brothers worked for him, and some of his children. He had 12 children. My dad's one of 12. Worked for them. My dad also would work summers for my grandfather. And I don't know if it was called Denher Homes or it was something with the name Denherter in it. Um, again, that's not something that I really knew, even though I knew my grandfather and I knew he was a builder. I never realized that he owned his own custom home building company in New Jersey
Hmm.
until I don't know, maybe this was within the last 10 years or so that I found that
Oh,
out.
really?
So, um, again, it wasn't the whole concept was not on my radar at all. And as far as banging a nail, building something, I had no skills whatsoever to do any of that. Um, that was more born out of my necessity to figure out how to fix something on a house that I owned because I couldn't afford at the time to hire somebody to come and do it. I was like, well, how hard
Yeah.
can it be? I'll just figure it out, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And it was some of it was a little pride too. Like somebody said, well, you can't do that. And when somebody says to me that I can't do something, it makes me want to do it all the more. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there was some of that there too. But
So let's get
um,
into that a little bit because I know that shortly after high school, you made some pretty adult decisions with what you were going to do that shaped the trajectory of your life.
mhm,
Specifically buying your first home at a very
mhm.
young age. Could you go into how that started a little bit?
So I guess without getting into too many of the nitty gritties
Mm,
there, I found myself at around 17 years old, um, living outside of my home that I was raised in.
mm,
Um, you and I found out that we have something in common. We both grew up in New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey for the first 11 years of my life, and then we moved out to Michigan, and my parents bought a house in Rockford, and that's where I lived until I was 17. Um, at 17, I found myself moving out unexpectedly, and I made the dumb decision to move in with a girl that I was dating at the time, and that's a whole nother conversation to have.
That's part two.
That's part two, dot, dot, dot. So I lived with her for maybe up to 6 months. And during the process of me living with her, um, I ran into a realtor. His name was Brian Tagg. I don't know if you've ever run into Brian
No,
Tagg,
I've
but he
not.
was my first realtor. And I just started a conversation. I said, hey, I'm interested in looking for houses, specifically houses that I could rent out. And very shortly, we found a duplex in Heritage Hill that I thought I wanted to buy.
Mm,
Um, the details are fuzzy to me at this point in my life, going back that many years. Somehow I qualified for a mortgage. And I
mm,
was able to buy this duplex, and I believe I owned it before I was 18.
mm,
So, so I moved into, it was an up and down duplex. I moved in at the bottom, and the upstairs was already rented. And I continued to rent to that lady until she moved out. Uh, and then her whole apartment needed to be renovated. So that's where I started doing my own work on that.
mm.
Um,
So at a
we
very
learned how to
early,
start demoing, sorry, we demoed walls, and we put trim up, and, I had a cousin that helped me. That was, you know, back then it didn't take much, but I just needed somebody that was one step further than I was.
mm,
And he was 1 or 2 steps ahead of me in terms of the skill of, hey, this is how you cut some baseboard, and this is how you cope the corner, and this is how you put casing around a door or something like that. And so I kind of worked with him. He was back then he came and helped me do this stuff, got me started, and then I just took it from there. So
so at a very early age, you started having thoughts, conversations, and dealings around cash flowing of a property, some
mhm,
business management skills.
yeah.
That's something in kind of like you and I have talked about in my previous interview with Nolan Merritt, who's a young man who started his own business as well. And I think back to myself at 17 when I was living in New Jersey, not far from where you grew up, and getting ready to graduate high school. I was thinking about at 17, I was thinking, I'm going to graduate. And when I graduate, my parents said I didn't have curfew anymore. And that was the biggest deal in my life. And here you are qualifying for a mortgage, buying a duplex,
Mhm,
learning about cash flowing a property. Um,
right.
I guess what I'm specifically interested in is it doesn't sound like you were thinking like a 17-year-old at that point in time. Was that because you didn't want to, or you didn't have the opportunity to not? You had to think like an adult because you were living kind of on your own at that point.
Well, I was certainly forced to have to start thinking like an adult. I would I would probably argue that my thought process went back much earlier than me at 17.
Mm,
Um, my first job was at, even when I lived in New Jersey, by the way, I was constantly doing work for my grandmother and my grandmother's girlfriends. I would go mow the lawn or trim the hedges, or, so I grew up always working and always interested in making my own money.
mm,
Um, and maybe that's because I grew up with not a lot. We had in New Jersey, I was one of six, and then my another brother came along after we moved to Michigan, so that was number seven. There was five boys and two girls. We didn't have a lot growing up, especially when we lived in New Jersey. We had hand-me-down clothes all the time.
mm,
And I saw the value in going out and working on my own. Uh, to make, even if it was $5 from my grandmother's girlfriends or something like that. Um, so that was already instilled in me. At 13, I got my first job in Grand Rapids. I worked for I forget what his last name was, Seitzma, on Knapp Corner For people that are familiar with Grand Rapids, we have
Mm-hmm.
a street called East Beltline, and it crosses with a street called Knapp,
Mm-hmm.
and we call it Knapp's Corner. Now Knapp's Corner, as you know, Todd, is completely developed with grocery stores and restaurants, but before all of that, it was an apple orchard. And when it was an apple orchard, I went and I worked for Mr. Seitzma, who owned the apple orchard, and I started pulling suckers for him on his apple trees. Now, a sucker is a shoot 12 inches long that grows in the spring, and you don't want those on an apple tree. So I had to climb up every apple tree, and I had to by hand pull off all of these new shoots on the tree and just keep the original branch. So I climbed trees all day long, and I got paid 10 or $15 a tree, and it would take me a couple hours to pull the suckers off of a tree. So that was 13. I was already doing that. My dad would take me to work every Saturday, and summers, I don't remember what my schedule was, but I don't remember how long that lasted. My second job was working for Ada Beef, which used to be on Grand River Drive. They were a slaughterhouse, and I was the guy at 14 to go in there and clean out the cattle trailers. So these cattle trailers would come in full of cattle, and they weren't in confined spaces, and they did what cows do. And it became a slurry that was probably 5 or 6 inches thick. And a lot of people don't know that those trailers are 4 layers. So they've got 2 mid layers, and then they've got an upper and a lower.
Mm-hmm.
And you start at the top, and you can imagine with a high pressure hose moving all of the liquids down to the next level, and then from there down at the bottom. And then there was big vent holes that all of the liquid would go out of the trailer on. So middle of summer, those things would get over 100 degrees, and I would be in this thing. I'm not a very tall guy, still not, but back then I was just a little kid, and they provided me with some hip waders that came up to about here on me. The high power hose was so powerful, I had to hold it with 2 hands because it would literally knock me over.
Yeah.
But what was I, 13 or 14? I think I was 14 when I was doing that job, and I just never stopped working.
Yeah.
From there, I worked in a restaurant business till after I graduated high school. So work was a big priority for me. And because of that, I clearly remember having to pay for my own things. If I wanted new clothes, I had to go out and spend my money to buy clothes. I couldn't wait to get out of the house. I couldn't wait to get my freedom. I saved up every single penny that I had, and I bought my first car at 15. The car was sitting in a driveway ready to go for the day I turned 16. I figured out how to buy a car at 15 years old.
Yeah.
Without any real help. I went and I found it. Back then, you'd have to open the classifieds in the paper.
Yep.
We didn't have a phone or social media, you know. And I met this guy, and I bought a 1985 Thunderbird from him. Sorry. My next car was a Firebird. This was a 1985 Thunderbird that I bought from him. And it sat in a driveway for probably 6 months before I got my license to be able to drive it. And so I had to figure all of these things out somehow. I was expected, if I had a car, then I had to pay for my own insurance. So I had to call the insurance agent, and I had to figure out how to put insurance on a car. And my first accident, I had to figure out how to call the insurance company and deal with getting an insurance claim. And like with 7 kids, I don't know, my parents were working. They were trying to raise 7 kids. So I had to figure this stuff out. If I wanted to do it, I had to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
And I could clearly remember to this day, I actually said to myself in my head, I'm never going to pay rent because it's a waste of money. And I was 16 or something when I made that decision. So when I moved in with my girlfriend at 17, I obviously had to contribute and help her pay rent for 5 or 6 months that I lived there. And I just couldn't believe that I had to go to work and make money and give it to a landlord, and I had nothing to show for it, like as far as ownership goes.
Right.
That bothered me. So so almost immediately I knew I was going to buy a house. And that's what I did. And I bought that duplex. I must have lived in there for a year or something like that. And then I took that and used that as collateral to buy another house, as a single family house. I moved into the single family. I rented out bedrooms in the single family while renting my duplex now, top and bottom. I again used both of those now as collateral, buy another one. And that's how I just kept on going. And, you know, the repair needs got greater, so my skill got better in
Hmm.
terms of I need to build a wall here. So now I learned how to build a wall, or I learned how to plumb, or I learned how to run electrical.
So
The
let me
second
ask you
house I
this,
bought,
because that was, you and I are almost the same age, and that was before YouTube. So when you're having to
true.
learn these new skills, you
Yep,
said you had a cousin who was a couple steps ahead of you. Did you have
yep.
friends or family members who are like, "Hey, man, I'll buy you pizza and whatever you want if you come show me how to do this for a day"? Is that kind of your learning curve, or was it a little bit
Do you
more?
mean did I offer pizza to people to come and help me and show me how to do things, or the other
Yes,
way around?
yes.
There was a lot of that.
Sounds like there was a lot of mentorship going on.
My cousin helped me for a little bit, and then I just took it off, and he got off on doing. You know, he went out and started his own career. He was a few years older than I was. Um, I just specifically remember him helping me on that first duplex that I bought. After that, I was pretty much on my own.
Mm,
Um, I would almost push back to say that respectfully, there was really nobody that mentored me at that stage of my
mm,
life at all.
okay.
Um, there was no older gentleman that came and saw alongside me and said, "Hey, this is what you need to do with your money. Um, let's talk about your debt to income ratio. Let's talk about profit losses. Um, how do you even write? How do you make a P&L, profit and loss?" I had no clue. Um, I often joked, and my mom would often joke with me, "We're faking it until we make it." And in some ways, there was true, because I almost had no idea what I was doing. I literally operated with, well, I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other and see where the road leads me.
Mm,
Um, and whether it was just a journey of complete faith, or I was I was naive to the point where I was overconfident, and my overconfidence led me to think that I could do something that, in hindsight, what were you thinking? Like, you really thought that was going to work? And I'm like, yeah, it did work. What are you talking about? You know, but I don't think I really knew what I was doing at all.
mm,
I Some of it was that I was going to college at the time. I was working a full-time job and also going to college. Um, Fairly rare concept nowadays, because back then it was almost the norm, and it was expected
mm,
that if you went to college, you either had full ride scholarships, or you figured out a way to pay for school as you went. So I went to community college. I paid for it as I went. I had no debt in as far as college debt goes. But I made a lot of good friends in college, and all of my college friends were just like, "Whoa, what is this guy doing?"
mm.
Guy's 18, 19 years old, going to college, working a job, owns 3 houses, renting them out. He's a landlord. Um, I got recognized in college. I was on we called it SLAB. It was Service Learning Advisory Board. And I was on the SLAB board in college. And basically we did community outreach type things. I was always mission minded. We went down to Oklahoma and stayed about a week on Indian reservation, and helped the community out there. We went down to Nashville and did some work down there. And um, I was the treasurer on Service Learning Advisory Board. So I got to make really, really good friends through that connection. Um, one of them was on the board with me, and he actually just rented from me. His name was Sean as well, spelled the same way as mine. And we lived in the same apartment together, and he rented a room from me in my duplex. Um, he was a DJ for GRD back in the day.
Mm.
Um, and he would often make jokes on the radio about it. I got this guy the same age as me as my landlord, and you know, anyway, I got recognized for some award that we were involved with SLAB, and I had to go up and make a speech, and Sean was up there first and announced me to get the award, and he again made a joke about how he's my landlord, and people were like, "What are you like? What are you talking about? This kid's in college. He's 19 years old. You know, he's got such a baby face. I probably looked like I was 15 years old, and I already owned. I was buying my second house at the time already. So I think that gave me maybe a false sense of confidence
Mm.
to continue to do it. Like, hey, it worked one time. Can I do it again?
Yeah.
Can I do it again, third time? And I just did it without any sense of the risk or the fear of what if it doesn't work. I don't remember that ever coming across my mind ever. Like, well, what if I can't make my mortgage payment?
Mm,
I think I was so ignorant at the time that I just never even thought about the consequences of if I screwed up. But on the flip side, I didn't think I was going to mess up. It was working for me. I had
yeah.
both my duplexes were rented out. By the time I moved into the third house next door to the second house that I bought, I fully rented the second house out to some college girls. And then the two people that were renting from me in the second house moved with me over to the third house. So I was still renting out both rooms in my third house. Plus, I was living there for free. And now renting out the second house and renting out the duplex.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to be working out for me.
Yeah.
I
That's,
just I just kept doing it.
yeah, there's a phrase that I've kind of adopted that I like, and it's this, it's done is better than perfect. And a lot of times people are paralyzed by getting it perfect or getting it right the
Hmm.
first time, where sometimes
Yep.
sometimes done is just what it needs to be. Just get it done. It may be a little
Yeah.
messy, but if you get it done, that's that's the secret sauce. So,
Yeah,
that
I think,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I understand that because I think there's a lot of people that have people overanalyze things. And maybe even more now than ever I see it in a lot of people where the fear keeps them from moving forward to try something. And I think a
Mm,
common thing that I said, and I've already said it in this interview, is my mentality was I have to put one foot in front of the other. I don't need to, I don't need, and the old adage, the Chinese adage is 1,000 mile journey begins with one step. I remember that adage when I was a kid, and I always used that in my own mind to encourage me. I don't need to understand how it's going to end up. I just need to start today with one step. And that one step leads me one more step down the road. And then I figure out the next step after I make the last step. And
mm,
just one step, one step, one
yeah.
step.
Do you have any from that specific period of time in your life? Are there any life lessons that maybe you could impart to somebody that age now? I've got some viewers on my channel who are currently seniors in high school, and they watch my videos because they think I'm cool, which hey, I am, guys. But like I've had conversations with them, and they are looking for advice from men our
Mhm.
age on, man, I don't know what to do in the next 3 or 4 years. What advice would you give them now as they're getting ready to graduate high school and probably in a different place in life than you were then? But what advice do you think you could give them?
There's so much there.
Part three.
Part three. I think social media has really done a disservice to young kids.
Mhm.
Um, you and I could both probably agree because we are the same age that when we grew up without technology, we we used our imaginations. We were always outside. We, when we were told to do something, we knew we had to immediately get up and do it. There was no negotiation. Like I'm going to count to three or 100, depending on who the parent is. Some parents are probably still out there counting to 1,000 as far as I'm concerned.
Mm,
Like we didn't have those options. When our parents said do that, we immediately got up and did it. And we had chores. We had to take care of the trash or do the dishes. And these were things that were expected. They weren't a suggestion.
mm,
You did them. And that instilled a work mentality in me and obviously in you, where I didn't want to ever personally for me, I never wanted to wait for somebody to nag me to do something. My thing was, I know the trash needs to go out, so I'm just going to go do it because I don't want somebody constantly on my back harping me to go take the trash out.
mm,
So, number one, I think there's personal responsibility, right? If you're a kid watching this interview right now and you're living with your parents, something in that house needs to be done. Your parents are probably working full-time jobs. They're busy, they're tired. how are you getting fed? That means they're going grocery shopping, they're feeding you, they're making you dinner, they're making you 3 meals a day. Trash builds up. Are you voluntarily taking trash out, or did you need to be asked? That's a personal responsibility thing. It's a
Mm,
character thing. What are you willing to do? And the point is that you have to work hard.
mm-hmm.
You have to work hard. There's no getting out of this life with the easy button. Working
Yeah.
hard is number one. Obviously, respect and respecting authority and all of those things come into play here. I think if I look back, I think I probably had a problem with authority. I think maybe that's some of my success though, is that I didn't want to listen to anybody. And certainly I didn't want somebody to say you couldn't do that, because when somebody said that to me, it just made me work all the harder. But
Yeah.
you have to work. You have to start saving your money. Stop spending your money on $6 coffees. Um, there's the old live on beans and rice type of mentality. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you have a goal, make a stated goal and make sure nothing stops you from achieving that goal.
Yeah.
Um, I think
Yeah.
it's really important to write your goals down and understand. Like, I didn't know that I was going to be a builder, but I knew that my number one step was I don't want to pay rent.
Yeah.
That was my foundation. From there, look what I built off of it from that comment that I made to myself. I agreed I wasn't going to spend my hard-earned money paying rent. Now, people come from all walks of life. I'm not trying to insult anybody that pays rent. I'm strictly telling you my story.
Right.
And my story was that I felt, for me personally, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something different with my life. Um, but I wouldn't have been able to do that without a goal. And my goal was that number one, I'm not going to pay rent. And then from there, I kept making new goals. I'm
Yeah.
still at 47 years old making new goals of where I want to be by the end of the year or next year.
Yeah. Oh,
So
that's
you have to
good. That
set a goal.
I just had a young man call me, who I won't name just because I know he won't want to be named. But we had a conversation, and he reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you about buying a house." And he's 17 years old.
Mhm.
And for those of you on my channel who already know this, I am in real estate and have done that for a number of years. And so he was like, "How do I buy a house?" So I was like, we need to get on a phone call. This is too much to, go back and forth on Messenger. So we spent probably 45 minutes going over that and exactly what you just said. I was like, right now, how often do you go to McDonald's? Well, I go to McDonald's 4 or 5 times a week. Okay. Well, if you're going to want to buy a house, you're going to have to stop that and set some
That's
goals.
right. That's right.
And we just kind of went through that exact thing. And kind of going back to your thing about being a member of the family, we've had conversations with our girls is that there are no neutral members of a family. You are either
Mhm.
an asset or a liability. And that's really, maybe babies, a 6 month old baby might be neutral, but if you really look at it, they're a liability because they are drawing
Mhm.
from the family, not necessarily contributing. So are you going to be an asset or a liability?
You know,
If Go ahead.
sorry, to that point, I think that a lot of times it's easy sometimes maybe for kids to just say, well, I'm a kid, you know, all of these things just miraculously happen around me. My
Yeah.
clothes are clean and they're folded on the bed. My bed is made and I have clean sheets on it, you know. But if you're listening to this, that stuff doesn't happen by a miracle. Somebody's working hard to do
Right.
that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And and I think stepping up to the plate and taking responsibility and ownership, especially as you get closer to becoming an adult, um, it's not going to fly anymore, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You have to start taking responsibility. And you have to make hard choices. I know that the shiny car that, you know, that you've been eyeballing for years, you could buy the car, but how much of your time is getting traded for that car
Yeah. Good
versus
point.
that money going in the bank and being saved for a down payment to buy your first house,
Hmm.
you know? So we're talking about assets versus liabilities now. And you have to understand your car is a liability any way you look at it.
Mm.
And you're going to a job to work multiple hours at $15 an hour or whatever you're making to pay for your insurance, your gas, your car payment, if you have a car payment. That's all taking away money at a crucial point in your life that you could be building that money up to use as a down payment for an investment. And maybe it's not real estate. Maybe your investment is something else. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to start a t-shirt company. You need $1,000 to buy the press and get your first shipment of vinyl prints for your press and t-shirts, and marketing. But if you're spending that money on a cell phone or stopping 4 times a week to get a $6 coffee or going to McDonald's, like, look at your expenses every month on your bank statement. And how much of it are you working to pay for a Starbucks coffee or going to McDonald's?
Yeah.
That's handicapping you from being able to move forward. So
yeah, no, those are all
things to
really
think
good
about, I
points.
guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, those are all really good points. If we could, in the time that we have left, kind of fast forward to when you started Den Herder Custom Homes. As an entrepreneur, what were the things that you had to think about when you were like, I'm going to start my own custom home building company? And start with what age you were at when you kind of went down that path.
My 4th house that I moved into was the first house that I built myself. So I had a house on Oakley Place, my duplex. I bought 2 houses on Innis, and then I moved out of my 3rd house, which was the 2nd house on Innis, into the house that I built in Rockford. I guess we could say that that was my first custom home. It was just a very small little ranch. I bought 2 acres of land in rural Rockford at the time. And by this point in my life, I was working for a building company that doesn't exist any longer. And I worked there for about 2 years. While I worked there, I think that's where I got my real training, and they trained me how to start framing houses and trimming houses. I quickly became a crew leader for a framing team, where they would just give me a print and I would go out with the team. We were all employees, but I was a team leader, and I was framing the houses. So we framed probably hundreds of houses. So I was able to buy a print from that builder. They allowed me to buy a print from them. They gave me a great deal on it, maybe a couple $100 for this print. And I learned how to build my own house from scratch. Taking what I learned in the business that I was in, building houses with them, just watching the steps. I would make connections with the concrete guy. I would make connections with the plumber. And I figured out how to successfully build my first house. Several years down the road, that house burned down. I had a young family at that point. I have 2 boys now, 22 and 17. We were newly married with a couple of young kids, and the house burned to the ground. I had to rebuild the house. So I ended up designing a different house on the existing foundation. I put an addition on the foundation and changed the style of house. So now this was my 2nd custom home that I built. I did something unique with that. When I got done building it, I found out when Parade of Homes was going on in my area. And I went to a local sign girl and I had her make me some signs that said Builder Open House with directional arrows. And I put these all over the area and I pointed people back to my house, and we hosted an open house in my new house. And we were banking
But
off
you
of
weren't really
Parade
in the
of-
Parade of Homes yet, were you?
No, because I couldn't afford to pay for the fee to get in the Parade of
Right.
Homes, and I had to be a member of the Parade of Homes. Great organization, by the way. I was in a position back then where I couldn't afford to put the fee in for the Parade of
Right.
Homes. So,
And you were
This
just
is
showing
what
your
I
own
did.
house. Who cares? It's your house, right? Yeah.
and that's what I did. So we ended up having, maybe 5 different couples walk through the house. And of the 5 couples, 1 couple offered me a lot of money for that house that I was living in, and somebody else ended up hiring me to build them a custom house. So it was quite successful
Yeah.
because I did sell the house, and I ended up, life is funny and ironic because I ended up selling that house and moving into a rental for almost a year while I sourced another piece of property and then ultimately built my third custom house for myself. So I did rent for a year. That does make me a bit of a hypocrite in that regard. But that's what we did. I was also forced out of my house when it burned down, and I had to rent
Right.
a house for a year while I rebuilt the first house after it burned down. So
Well, I think everybody who's watching this is going to forgive you, Sean. You're okay.
I hope so. I'm pretty hard on myself, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it kind of happened organically and without a lot of planning.
Hmm.
We could argue that if my house didn't burn down, maybe I would never be in the custom home business.
Hmm.
But because the
Yeah.
house burned down, not only did I have to learn how to rebuild it, and I rebuilt a different house. And I was all hands-on back then. I did everything. In fact, it's only been the last 8 years that I've been a general contractor where I don't do manual labor anymore because we became so busy that I had to pull myself out and start just doing strictly management. But back then I did everything. I framed it, I roofed it, I sided it, I trimmed it, I painted it. One of my brothers worked with me for years, and the things that we did for manual labor, we became very good at.
Yeah.
There was things like drywall that we just weren't good at and didn't have the interest in doing, so we had to hire drywall out. But had it not been for the house fire, had I not rebuilt my house, had I not had the idea to do a builder open house and got some people in there that bought my house and wanted me to build a custom house, none of it would have happened.
Right.
So I didn't go into it thinking I'm going to be a custom home builder.
It kind of happened to you.
It kind of happened because I built the house thinking I was going to live here indefinitely when I built
Right.
the house, and we lived there for maybe 8 years or so before the house fire, 7 years, something like that. And suddenly now I was faced with having to rebuild my house. So now I rebuilt the house, and it was a really cute house that I built. I put all hardwood floors in there, and I had a custom hickory kitchen in there, and so people really appreciated what we did there. We ended up taking pictures and putting them on social media, and it got me more business. So suddenly now I'm learning how to build a custom home for people. And there's a huge learning curve with that. You don't just become a custom home builder.
Oh, yeah.
Overnight. I mean, I was reflecting back with a business partner just a couple of days ago, and I went all the way back to the first house that I built as a custom, where I had to be responsible to a client. I had to make a sworn statement. I didn't even know what a sworn statement was at the time. For people watching that don't know, it's basically a line item bid with a building permit, footings and walls, framing material. So every line item had an association of framing labor material with a dollar amount, bring it down the column, and that's your total price to your cost to build. I had to learn how to work with the banks on a construction loan. So I take that sworn statement and submit it to the bank. And so now I'm responsible to the bank as well as to the client, as well as getting large draws from the bank that now I'm responsible for to make sure that I use appropriately to build the house that the client wants. So huge learning curve.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge.
But it sounds like you kind of took your early mindset of just putting one foot in front of the other and okay, here's my next step. Here's my next step.
Fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
and I remember making that joke, like I'm faking building a custom home until I make it. And just because if you didn't have a little bit of levity about it, it would be overwhelming. Like, what am I doing? I'm responsible for, I think it was maybe $400,000 house back then that I was building for this client. But certainly the most amount of money that I've ever had to be responsible for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility.
And a lot of trust as well, because when somebody's giving you that much money for the place where they're going to live, that is, it exceeds a business relationship. It becomes a personal and trust relationship at that point as well.
You could say that part of it was a character thing. I mean, they obviously saw something in me that said they're willing to trust me to build their house for them and be responsible with the money that I was getting. I could have taken that money and done anything with it.
Right. And
But it was
we
so
hear
important.
those stories on the news.
Well, there was just a big story recently about this, where the builder, the way that I describe this is you rob Peter to pay Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is if the client's bank gives me a draw of, let's call it 100,000, I take that $100,000 when I receive it, instead of applying it to the build for that client, I take that 100,000 and I use it on a project over here because I didn't manage my money well over here.
Mm-hmm.
So now this becomes a money management character issue thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've made it a practice and a point internally. I have a really good bookkeeper that works for me. She's been with me for about 8 years. We don't rob Peter to pay Paul. It's been, when I hired her, I made it crystal clear that we would never, ever do that. Maybe it's because I was fresh off of the experience of the market crash in 2003 and 4, where a lot of the builders and a lot of the subcontractors that I was working with or doing business with went under the table.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these guys had to give everything that they had back to the bank. And I learned important lessons there. I saw a lot of my guys buying brand new trucks and buying boats and just, we've got the cash flow coming in, so we're going to go spend it. And they
Right.
were in debt up to their eyeballs. That really bothered me. That's part 4. I don't know what part we're on right now, but
Yeah, 4.
but becoming debt free and building off of your debt or building off of your own capital is a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother chapter to this story. But I think it takes incredible perseverance. It takes incredible discipline. We personally, we being my wife and myself, after the house fire, we were facing an enormous amount of debt. Just between the market crash and me not getting work during the market crash, and everything kind of culminated at the same time. My wife needed some major surgery. Before the house fire, we actually had a tree come through the living room, and I had to rebuild the living room roof.
Oh, gosh.
Right, so things just kept on happening, and
Yeah.
then we had my second son, and like everybody, life happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to the point where we were completely overwhelmed. I was getting dozen calls a day from debt collectors trying to collect debt that I owed, because I couldn't make my payments. I was leasing a truck at the time. I probably made every mistake that you could possibly make. When I said to you when you first contacted me, I'm just a guy that got a high school education, I'm a nobody. And I said to you, I earned my doctorate from the School of Hard Knocks. I meant that. Because I made all the wrong mistakes. Even though on one side I was doing all of these cool things like buying houses, and we haven't talked about the houses that I bought and I flipped. There was a lot of those during all of these years, and we could go on and on and on. I don't know how much time we have, but throughout it all, what started it was we went on a debt-free journey, and that debt-free journey was a grovel, like on our hands and knees, climbing up a mountain. Like it was just a grind, and it took us almost probably 10 or 12 years to the point where we finally got to the point where we're at zero. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past. We felt wealthy at zero. And then I remember the day that we were able to get enough money to put $1,000 in a savings account, and then build off of that. But
yes, but let's talk about the perspective of that. You say, you felt wealthy at zero and it took you 10 to 12 years to get there. Let's remember that most people watching this have a 30-year mortgage.
Right.
And you did it in 10 to 12 years.
That's right.
So 10 to 12 years of hard work and making sacrifices, or 30 years of, getting by, scraping by, and many people are not. Many people are just fine with that. But I think a lot of that is perspective. Do you want to do the hard work, scrape by, and fight for it like you did and get to that net zero? Or are you like, I'm really okay with a 30-year mortgage. That's fine with me. I can make the payments and I've got enough to go on vacation, and that's okay. So,
and there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely the norm in America. Somebody close to me many, many years ago said, just get used to it. Everybody has a car payment. That's just normal. Just pay the $500 go buy a brand new car and make the car payment, because everybody in America has a car payment. And that to me was almost like when I describe when people say you can't do that, that like lit a fire under me and said, what do you mean? I have to get used to making a car payment?
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that. And so that became part of my debt-free journey. That was one of the catalysts that lit a fire under me to say, I'm gonna grovel like what does Dave Ramsey say? Work now, like I don't remember what his saying is about that. So you can live like no other after you're debt free.
Mm.
It just it just slipped my mind, so I apologize to the viewers that I don't remember what he says, but he says it often enough. In fact, go listen to Dave Ramsey; it'll do you good.
Yeah.
It did me
If you're
good.
watching this, put it in the comments so we can all remember what that is.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Um, again, this is my story and this is my journey, and these are my decisions that I made. But
Yeah.
the stress that I was under by just take the dozen phone calls a day I was getting from debt collectors.
Yeah.
Every single time my phone would ring, it was a 1-800 number with a debt collector. The stress of that for years on end was just so overwhelming. And then you put on top of that a house fire and being relocated
Hmm.
5 times in that year with small kids, and the trauma that the kids went through,
Hmm.
that they had to go through, and losing their house and losing all their possessions, and major surgery for my wife and a cancer scare, and with my wife, and everything else that happens in life on a daily basis. And then you put the financial pressure on top of all that. It was enormous.
Yeah.
And I just had to do something about it. I looked at my wife, and I can remember clear as day, I said to her, I will never, ever put us in this position ever again. This position being meaning this financial instability,
Mm.
the having debt collectors call us all the time, and me being stressed out, like at my max all the time. It was just a horrible time in our life. It was extremely stressful. And somehow through it all, I managed to just get up every morning and say, this is my stated goal. That in this story, for this example, my goal was I want to be debt free. I want to get to net zero.
Hmm.
And that was all I can see, is that's my goal. And if it takes me 10 years, it's going to take me 10 years. We're not going on vacation. We're not going out to eat. We're not going to Starbucks. Some of our biggest fights in our marriage were because my wife, I would read the bank statement, and my wife would have stopped at Starbucks 2 times that month. And we spent $12 that we didn't have on Starbucks,
Right.
right? But there was extreme discipline and sacrifice in this story.
Yeah.
And I know that's not for everybody, but if I think about it and I let myself, I could actually get emotional about it, because we didn't take vacations. And it was so hard because right around that time, Facebook came alive, and we were looking at our friends going on these amazing vacations nonstop. We're like, we can't go on vacation because we have this goal. And we're
Yeah.
not going on vacation until we have enough money saved up in our vacation fund to pay for the vacation, because we're not putting it on a credit card.
Yeah.
And that's how disciplined we were. And somehow Rachel supported me in this driven mind state that I was at, that this is my goal, this is what we're going to get. And I'm going to get our family to a point where we're financially stable, because
Yeah.
I don't ever want to put my family through this again.
Yeah.
So we're touching on many, many different topics, and we're painting with a broad stroke. And I know we got time restraints here. And I will say that the most important thing of all of my story is that as a Christian, God provided for me no matter
Mm.
what. With as little as that we had, as poor as we were, as no money in the bank whatsoever, with what we had, we put tithing on the top of our budget. Tithing was above our mortgage. And then we drew a line. At some point, we ran out of money and we drew a line, and people didn't get paid below the line. And I had to get used to that. That was really, really hard, because I had to intentionally say, I'm not going to pay this person or that person. And of course, we came back and made it right, after we got this sorted out. But putting tithing at the top of the list is absolutely what got us through. There was something, not only spiritually, if you're a Christian, you understand the tithing concept, but I think just the the act of opening your hands up and just letting go and
Mm.
saying, I don't have control of this situation. I'm going to give it over to, in my case, I gave it over to God. I said, you're in control of my life. This is what I want to do. I have all these dreams and aspirations, but ultimately you're in control of my life. You've taken away from me, meaning we had a house fire and you took my house away from me for whatever reason. There was a lesson in there for me that I had to learn. Maybe it was my pride. Maybe it was because the bigger picture was I was going to learn how to build custom houses and make a career out of it. Um, I don't know. I
Isn't
don't
that a
want to take.
crazy thought, Sean? Like I'm sitting here listening to your story, and I've experienced some. My house has never burned down, thankfully, but I think many people watching this have experienced hard times in their own lives, and to think about the fact that you know had, had your house not burned down, you might not have gone into the custom home building business, and your life may not have been what it is now had that negative thing not happened. And a lot of
Mhm.
people look at negative things as, oh, that's horrible. That shouldn't have happened. And why did God let that happen? Well, maybe God
Right.
let that happen because there was something fantastic on the backside of that was coming for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's great.
And what God didn't let happen that day is that nobody died in that fire.
Hmm.
So
The most
imagine
precious things.
the most precious things. So
Yeah.
he gave me a skill set to be able to put that house back together for my family.
Hmm.
And that's the blessing in it. And the blessing is that it taught me so many lessons along the way, lessons that I'll continue to learn for the rest of my life. Um, but through it all, the constant for me is always that God is faithful. He
Yeah.
always provides for me, no matter
Yeah.
what. No matter when I was poor, no matter where I'm at in my life now, everything I have comes from God, and I have to remember that.
Yeah.
And it, it makes me emotional, to be honest with you, because there's so much story behind what I'm saying to you. And
Yeah.
and if you walked in my shoes and understood how faithful God was in my life, you can't help but not get emotional and not give all the glory to God.
Yeah. Now, I was
Because
talking with another person on a previous interview, and I saw this little, you go into these stores that have these little knick-knacky signs like home sweet home and stuff like that.
yep,
And there was a sign there that stopped me in my tracks, and I took a picture of it, and I still have it on my phone. And it says, people complain about, why did I have to go through this or why did I have to go through that? And the sign
yep,
simply said, you were given this life because you're strong enough to live it. And I think, if I was transplanted into Sean, would I have been able to make the life that you've made out of it? Probably not. It's your story. God gave you that life,
mhm,
gave you your life for you to live. And
yeah,
we all have our own story. And I know when I first contacted you about doing this interview, you were like, "Oh, I don't have anything to say." And then we got on the phone just to talk, and like an hour later, it's like, I think you got a great story, Sean. I'd love to share it. And I know we're just scratching the surface with this right now,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
agree 100%. One thing, because we are going to get short on time here in just a little bit. For my audience knows me as People First Coaching and Consulting, and that's a leadership development, leadership coaching, and consulting company. And one of the things that I'm interested in is you've started your entrepreneurial spirit very early on in life, and you were making business decisions well before your peers were. You were starting businesses, doing things that other people your own age were not doing. Um, and as you were, I thought about this when you talked about, you worked for that building company and you were the framing crew leader. As a young man who, self-professed didn't know what you were doing, how did you lead other people
mhm,
when you didn't know how to lead other people? And then what does that look like
yeah,
today after you've been
yeah.
leading other people for 20 some years?
I I feel strongly about this because when I was working for the building company, I was the first employee for this company, and he was building 20 to 30 houses a year, and he was managing them on his own.
Hmm.
Um, sorry, I was the second employee of his. So he was managing, he hired a guy his same age to kind of take over his spot so he could start doing more bigger things, buying land, developing things like that. Within probably 2 years or less, he was doing 200 houses a year. So the gentleman that he hired first, with me being the second guy that he hired, was what I don't know if I'm sure the viewers have watched or can watch Dude Perfect on YouTube. My kids were into this for a while. If you've ever watched Dude Perfect, there's a guy on there that has a character and they call him the Rage Monster. And you know, these guys try and make these shots and they'll stand 100 feet back and throw a basketball on a hoop, and they just keep doing it until they make it. And they created a show called Dude Perfect, doing all these funny little things. So the Rage Monster would just get mad because he couldn't make the shot and just go destroy things. The kids thought it was hilarious. I so related with that show because of the Rage Monster, because that's part of my story. And Keith, this gentleman that that I'm talking about, was just a rage monster. And if you screwed up, he would get in your face and scream at you. Like, there was fear there. Like, he instilled fear in you to get you to do what he wanted you to do. And I passionately disagreed with that management style and that leadership style. So as I started leading by using positivity. I thought that I would be better off giving somebody a compliment, like, you did a really, really nice job today on that framing. Like, look how, even if, let's just say that 90% of the frame job that they did was really bad, I would go and intentionally find something that they did positive, that they did good, and say, you did a really good job on this. Look how nice this is. A pastor that I grew up under used to use what he calls, and I'm sure he uses it still to this day, the sandwich principle. If you have to tell somebody something that's negative, you always start with something positive. And then you sandwich it. You say something positive. You say your critique, constructive criticism, and you end it with something positive. And I try to apply that principle in every area of my life that I possibly can. And I fall short, believe me. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's something that I always try to practice. And I always try to practice is, even to this day, with the guys that I hire on a regular basis. I have a really good team of guys that I hire on a regular basis, guys that are owner operators that I've been using for years, that I've developed good, positive relationships with. They will never see me yelling on a job. I'm not that guy that comes in there and I'm not the rage monster on the job. I'm going to go in there and there's always something on a job that is either not to my expectation or done wrong. And I have to have a hard conversation with somebody to say, look, this needs to be corrected. But it's the approach. Do I go in there and just start screaming and cursing at them, telling them how stupid they are for making a simple mistake? I refuse to do that. And that gentleman, when I saw his management style, I actually built my company directly the opposite, very intentionally, because I was never going to be the rage monster leader. I don't think that's leading, honestly. I think if I could build people up around me, then I think that maybe that's even even in my career, right? Some people go to the mission field and that's what they do. They're missionaries. But how can you apply that to your daily life and work? Can you make a positive impact in people around you is the question. I don't know. I don't get enough feedback to know if I'm doing that or not. But I'm telling you that that's what I try to do on a regular basis. I want to build people up. I want my plumber to be a better plumber tomorrow than he is today. I want my framer to be a better framer than he is today, tomorrow.
There's that thought going around right now. I've seen it several times in the past week. 1% better every day.
Froze. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. I think we both froze for a second. I was going to say I think one of the things I've seen recently is 1% better every day, and everybody can do 1% because that's easy.
I agree.
So, and then you don't have to turn an aircraft carrier 180 degrees. You just have to change it 1 degree. And there's a
Yeah,
a phrase that I used back in my teaching days, and I said at 211 degrees you just have hot water, but at 212 degrees it boils. 1 degree of
right,
difference changes everything.
right.
Um,
Well,
so
it's playing off of the one step for 1,000 mile journey.
yes.
It's it's just increments, right? What's that common movie out there with Bob? What about Bob? Have you ever watched What About Bob?
No, I've
Baby
never seen
steps
that whole
off the
thing.
couch,
Yeah.
baby steps to the front door, baby
Yeah.
steps to the front porch, right? I mean, we're making a little bit of a joke, but you could see that the common theme
Hmm.
here is you have to get off the couch and start moving. Even if all you do is stand up off the couch and take one step.
Yes.
You're no longer sitting on the couch anymore.
Right. Yep.
Now you're standing, right?
Hmm.
And then the next step is where does it go from there? Make a goal every single step then. I made a goal to stand up off the couch, so I accomplished my goal. My next goal is whatever it is, I'm gonna go to the garage and ultimately clean the car that I've been avoiding for a year, or
Hmm.
whatever it is, whatever excuse we make for ourselves.
Yeah.
So um, I think those are important. I think that um, that's what I continue to challenge myself with, is to build up people around me instead of tear them down. And I think I've seen enough of people in my life, even currently, um, using that style of tearing people down, yelling and getting angry with people, and bullying in some
Hmm.
ways. I definitely think that a lot of that is bullying. I would almost argue that some of it is an insecurity.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yep.
I think that I just don't think it's good leadership, in my opinion, if you have to break people down,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I'm
rather
gonna
than
put
try and
a
build them up.
shameless self plug in here, and I've got
Do it.
dozens of videos on my YouTube channel, all on how to do this the right way. So yeah, no,
Good,
I agree with everything you're saying. Absolutely.
good. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Sean, I am at the end of our time, and I know you've probably got stuff
Mhm.
because you've been on meetings all day as well. So, thank you so much for your time. Maybe I will try to convince you to do Sean 2.0 and then 3.0 and 4.0.
I can be
Because,
convinced of that,
all right,
Uh,
good, good.
uh,
I'm glad because we
I
literally we all have only scratched the surface of your story, and I
oh,
know
we've
that.
always scratched the surface.
Yeah.
The joke has been within people that are super close to me every single time for years. It's you really need to write a book,
Hmm.
because there's literally so much there, um, that I could go on and on and on and on for hours. And I'm a guy that just graduated high school,
Yeah, you keep
but I have
saying that,
so
but
many
there's a lot of
life
depth there, Sean.
experiences that I feel like could be, even if you learn from all of my bad mistakes, I would count that as a win. Let me
Right.
make the mistake so that you could learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always wanted that for my boys too. I mean, how often did I say to my boys, I could potentially, if you listen to my advice, not saying that I'm right, but if you listen to my story rather, of all the things that I did wrong in my 20s and do the opposite, you'll be set up for success way further along than I ever was. Because you could argue that I didn't get my stuff in a group until I was well into my 30s, and I could have avoided a lot of heartache in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And mentors are a big deal. Like if you're young and you're looking at this, like going back to the conversation we had earlier, to these young guys or young girls that might be listening, it's important to have a mentor
Yeah.
in your life.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be your parents. It could be somebody that you could trust, that has been there and done that.
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey always says, don't take advice from broke people. Don't take marriage advice from people that have been divorced. Nothing against either, but the point is that you get advice from people that are successful. Robert
Hmm.
Kiyosaki said, hire people smarter than you. Don't
Yes.
be afraid to do that,
Yeah.
because that also shows a lot of confidence in the person making the decision too,
Right.
right? I'm confident enough in myself that I could trust. I don't have to be the expert in a room. I'm okay with saying you're smarter than
Yeah.
me, but it's also ultimately making me more successful.
Yeah.
So
If you hire a rocket ship, you have to light it and then step out of the way and let them do
yeah,
what they do. And that's why you
that's
hired
right.
them. So,
That's why you hired him. So
Well,
let them do
Sean,
it.
thank you so much for your time today. I really
Mhm.
appreciate it. I'm sure we're going to be in touch over the next time. I know you've got a vacation coming up here, so I won't bug you while you're on vacation. But
Going back
thank
to
you
New
for your time
Jersey.
today. What's that?
I said it's going back to New Jersey,
Going
going
back
back
to
to the
New
roots.
Jersey. Yep, yep.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
So,
So
well,
thanks again for offering and for asking me. I appreciate it. You know, I was super nervous going into it. I'm not, this isn't me really,
did I make
but
you relaxed at least? You seemed relaxed.
I'm relaxed. I'm
Good.
relaxed and I appreciate you giving me a platform that even if it's just scratching the surface as just this is all it ever is to tell a little bit of my story. So I appreciate it.
Well, Sean, thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And please
And you
get a
too.
bagel with whipped cream cheese for me
Yep.
from New Jersey because we can't get them
Got
in
it.
Michigan that are any good.
I know. I hear about it all the time. Sounds good. Thanks so much, and you have a good day too, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks, man. Talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.